At 0630 hours this morning, we became aware of a man in the 1300 block of Ripley in Maplewood reporting that he had been a victim of a carjacking. At about 6:41, the carjacking victim's unoccupied car was found on Ripley in that area. And at 06:45 hours, Sergeant Bergeron checked out in the area of the Bruce Pinto Trail and Arlington Avenue in St. Paul. About that same time, a jogger along the Bruce Pinto Trail witnessed a white male and a black male suspect walk up to the sergeant's car and shoot him. When the suspects fled from the scene on foot, the jogger ran back to the car to check on the condition of the officer. Finding him mortally wounded, he grabbed the police radio and reported that the officer was down and there was a signal 13. Maplewood officers then responded to assist their brother officer. And when the officers went back to the last location where the car had been seen, the victim and his vehicle were gone at that time. Immediately, St. Paul, Ramsey County, and officers from a dozen municipal agencies, county and state agencies, converged on the area. A perimeter, one of the largest perimeters I've ever seen, was established literally from Larpenteur to Maryland Avenue, from Prosperity to the other side of Lake Phelan. In addition, in excess of 50 squads were tied up in making sure that perimeter was buttoned up tight. And a search was conducted using the SWAT team with K-9 as support. At 10:34 hours, a St. Paul officer, veteran officer with 25 years, a member of the K-9 unit, was holding a point on perimeter in the area of Ivy and Prosperity when a black male suspect emerged from the woods carrying what has been described as a toolbox and some items. The officer engaged this individual verbally, trying to figure out what he was doing coming out of the woods, and was immediately attacked. Reports that we've gotten from, and many of them from the media, showed the officer being struck repeatedly about the head. And in fact, the officer went down. The suspect straddled him, and the officer was able to get him off of him and then engage him in a deadly force encounter, which resulted in the 21-year-old young man with a history of armed robbery being fatally shot and wounded at that time. The officer was transported to Regents Hospital, where he was treated for a broken nose and what sounds like possibly broken eye sockets from being struck about the face with a heavy blunt object. The officer is in stable and satisfactory condition, and we are holding his name as we normally do in an officer-involved shooting. At about 1:30, actually around 12:30, we received information that was developed both from the victim, from other investigative sources, and other tips that were called in, that the white male suspect had been in the area of Selby Dale near the Mississippi Market. SWAT team moved into that area. A perimeter was set up around that area, and we began to develop information towards getting a search warrant where we could enter the house where we believed he was. While we were in the process of getting that warrant and staging there, new information was received by one of the investigators that the suspect was not at that location, but in fact was on the 1000 block of Duluth, and was making both suicidal and homicidal statements to us that he would not be taken alive and that he may well take himself out. The SWAT team moved into position there. Hostage negotiation moved in, and they were able to talk the young man out of the house. He had, in fact, suffered some injuries that appear to be self-inflicted, attempted suicide type injuries. He was transported to Regents Hospital and then will subsequently be booked into the law enforcement center later on today. His injuries are not life-threatening at this time.
City of Maplewood and the law enforcement community, law enforcement family, lost one of the finest officers there is today. Sergeant Joe Bergeron has been a member of the Maplewood Police Department for 26 and a half years and proudly served the citizens of Maplewood for that time. He was a very proud officer, very proud officer. And he's one of the finest people I know. And he was murdered today, senselessly. And he leaves behind a wife and 2 beautiful daughters. We will miss him. We will miss him terribly.
This is a day that I or any elected official hopes will never happen in their community, and yet it has, and so we have to deal with the consequences. Of course, our first thoughts are for our sergeant and his family, and in the coming days, weeks, and months, we will be making sure that we take care of their needs first. We also need to think about the rest of our police force. I'm sure you're all familiar with the fact that in North St. Paul, Officer Crittenton, his death was not that long ago, and our police force was still recovering from that. And so this will be an added blow for them and an added burden. And so we will redouble our efforts to make sure that we do everything that we can to make sure that our police force is taken care of.
There are no darker days for any city, for any community, than when an officer is murdered in the line of duty. It's a tragedy. It is something that is seared into your memory and into your soul, and you never forget it. Sergeant Bergeron, by all accounts, was a wonderful, wonderful officer, a wonderful family man, a wonderful person, and his death is nothing short of a tragedy.